Morning, everyone. So I'll do a quick introduction of John and me and our practice group so that we can get pretty quickly to the substance. So my name is Cam Schilling, and of course, my colleague on the call is John Weaver. We are part of a practice group of 4 attorneys and 1 paralegal at McLane Middelton who have done cyber security and cyber privacy now for quite some time. We started the practice group in 2008, even before it was a thing. We didn't call it cyber privacy and cybersecurity back then, but it has obviously grown into a huge area of the practice of law and a huge concern for businesses. So John and I and our colleagues are really very happy to be able to represent businesses and help you guys deal with some of these really difficult issues. So I'm going to stop the intro there and let John do a summary of the presentation, and then we'll launch kind of directly into the content.
Thanks so much, Cam. I'll let you get the slides situated.
There you go.
Excellent. So we have a few parts to the presentation today. We'll be starting with what we like to call the threat landscape, basically an explanation of how did we get to where we are in terms of cybersecurity and the threats we're encountering. Because I think there is some misconception that some of these threats have stayed the same for the last several years. It's really not the case. The nature of the threats, the tools that are being used against businesses and entities has evolved and changed, and that requires a matching evolution and changing tactics and strategies by businesses and entities. We'll move from that broad overview of what the threats are to sort of looking at the last 9 months or so in 2021, and even going back to 2020, looking at what we've learned during this period of remote working and how the threat landscape has changed and how our strategies to respond to that have changed and what you should expect because of that. From there, based on the threat landscape, based on what the last 9 months, last year or so has brought, what's your to-do list? What are the things, the quick hit imperatives that we think every company, every entity should be looking at? Now, we'll speak about the difference between, say, getting a true assessment of where your information security controls are and that to-do list. But for the presentation today, we're going to go through that to-do list so that you have a really clear idea of action items that we think that you should be looking at and that will provide palpable improvements to your security controls and your own information security. From there, we'll go into 2022 and beyond, what we think will happen next. And then that's where we'll wrap up and take questions. But I do want to draw your attention to the appendices that are at the bottom. The vast majority of the slides that you're going to receive in the PDF are taken up by appendices. These are a more detailed look at the process of risk management as opposed to just the to-do list. Process of risk management really goes through your practices, goes through the information that you collect and figures out where your vulnerabilities are, finds ways to manage those, to remediate those, to improve those, trains your employees, drafts policies that helps you comply with regulatory requirements as well as best practices. The appendices also address the regulatory landscape. We're big on the word landscape here, but all of the regulations from a variety of different jurisdictions where you may operate, and even if you don't operate, they're indicative of what's coming down the line, particularly with regard to privacy. We're not going to talk very much about privacy today, but in the United States, information security is much more developed in terms of regulatory issues. Privacy, what you can do with the information of individuals you gather is not as developed, but it's coming. And you'll see some of that in the regulatory landscape. And then finally, tiered controls. We'll talk a lot about this being a process, and the to-do list is some quick action items, but the tiered controls show how all of those to-do lists add up. And once you have improved one information security control, how that can keep evolving so that you are continually moving yourself on a spectrum from insecure to more secure, toward more secure and addressing a lot of the threats that we're going to discuss today.
Awesome. Thanks, John. All right, I'm going to go through some statistical materials just to kind of show you where we were a number of years ago and where we are now. So when breach was becoming significantly prevalent in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, up through 16, we were seeing the industries being hit as the industries you'd think of to be hit by cyber attacks, particularly healthcare and finance, including banking. Those are industries that attackers targeted primarily because they had significant volumes of helpful information. In some ways back then, it was about financial information. Credit cards were a big issue back then, but also healthcare information. The target of attacks has really evolved away from healthcare and banking, in part because those industries are highly regulated and have invested significantly more in cybersecurity than other industries, and in part because cyber attacks have not just been about an immediate theft of money or an immediate theft of information, but more about developing information about people or developing information about businesses, really deep background information that could either be used to develop false identities for individuals or in the long term to hatch kind of more sophisticated cyber scams. And the businesses that have these deep volumes of information are industries like education or IT, the IT sectors, and as you can see, the red line being the professional services sector, lawyers, accountants, financial services, insurance services. We just hold plethora of information, really valuable, deep information about individuals that attackers are looking to get at. So in addition to kind of the evolution of this between different industries, there's been an evolution of the ways in which these compromises have been achieved. Hacking obviously was one of the biggest threats a number of years ago, and this is typically the type of hacking that occurs through forced entry. This was either forced entry through firewalls or forced entry through outdated and unpatched systems, that type of stuff. And that has evolved significantly away from hacking that's too hard. The protections have gotten too good to prevent blunt force hackers to get in, and moved significantly more towards credential compromises. So in other words, stolen passwords, financial crimes, and we're going to talk about all of these, and ransomware is the universally acknowledged biggest threat, bar none, of any cybersecurity threat that exists. So the methods of cyber attack are important, and we're going to talk about how we prevent any number of these. Phishing is by far and away the most significant way to get malware on the system, although malicious websites is also very significant. And then as far as costs go, and the cost of breach ransomware is top of the list by far, almost certainly going to be 50% or more in 2021. Followed by financial crime and business interruption. We're going to talk about all of this as we go along. Really, this to-do list that John and I are going to spend most of the presentation talking about is, a top 20 list of things that for businesses to do to prevent the vast majority of any threat that can come at us. All right, back to John.
So let's discuss what we've seen this year and really during the pandemic / quarantine period, and some of the lessons that we've learned that come out of that. Number one is that, and we saw this before, but just the last year and a half has reinforced this: the threats, the risks, bad actors, they are constantly evolving and making advances in the technologies that they use. And as a result, and they're getting really good. If you have participated in phishing tests, you have been a victim of a phishing expedition where you get a fake email from a bad actor and there's a link that you click on and you enter your credentials or it downloads malware, those are getting really good. I think there's a stereotype that some of that is the stereotypical Nigerian prince email where the grammar's bad, the spelling's bad, that doesn't come from anybody you recognize, you can easily dismiss it. It's not the case anymore. The emails look like they're from peers and contacts, possibly people you work with. And if they have access to your system, they might time it so that you're expecting an email from that person. And so all of these advances drive up costs and the impacts to business. Second, the remote hybrid workforce is here to stay. I don't think that'll surprise anybody on this call, but that means that the digital real estate that IT departments and MSPs have protected went from an office to homes in office, because homes are now offices. And sometimes that expansion has been done without appropriate care for information security. And so those laptops, those devices that are being taken into the homes and connecting to offices aren't as secure as the computers, the devices, the infrastructure in the office. And that creates vulnerabilities that we are seeing being exploited as time goes on. Third, operational and financial impacts have strained IT departments and corporate balance sheets. And in parentheses, we put in sometimes to the breaking point. I certainly have seen this with clients where there was one client that I helped respond to a breach earlier this year. And one of their best IT guys at the end of it said, "I'm out. I can't do this." And it was that stressful for them. And so having resources in place, appropriately funded, appropriately trained, that's really important as you address the threat landscape in the current business climate. And then finally, and we can't emphasize this enough, no business, no matter its size or industry, is spared. We run into a number of organizations, number of businesses that say, "That's not me, I'm too small," or "my industry isn't a target." And they're looking at it the wrong way. They're looking at it like there is somebody with a spear targeting fish, and that's not the case. The bad actors don't have spears, they have nets. And if you're caught in the net, it doesn't matter if they were aiming for you, you're still going to get caught. So you should not think of yourself as a company of a certain size or a certain industry that isn't of interest to bad actors and hackers. You're of interest. If they can get you, they're interested in it. So it's a little bit of further information on what's going on right now in terms of threats, risks, and technological advances. Survey this year found that 86.2% of the firms that the tech companies surveyed had experienced a successful attack, a successful cyber attack. So again, think of it as a matter of when, not if. That's the way you should approach it. Particularly when you look at the results. The average reported downtime from ransomware, 21 days. As Cam mentioned, ransomware is far and away the most prevalent form of cyber attack that's occurring right now. And on average, companies that suffer a ransomware attack are down for 21 days. You should ask yourself, what would I do if my organization could not operate its network or its systems for 21 days and respond accordingly? Second, the average reported loss from financial crime is $50,000. Could you suffer that kind of loss? Is that something that you're prepared for? Malicious domains have spiked. Information seekers beware. What that means is there are more bad websites out there, bad links that if you click on, that could bring malware into your system without you realizing it. Embedded malware exists where it is least expected. As I mentioned before, there are spoofed emails potentially coming from colleagues, from clients, from peers, where their email either has been hacked or their system is being watched and their email is being spoofed. And hackers are able to send really legitimate looking emails that could have malware in them, and you just don't expect it because you think it's from a trusted source. Finally, ransomware as a service, the new illegal business model. Ransomware is a business. These are organizations, frequently, if you talk with forensic investigators that do this professionally, that respond to this professionally, they're looking at organized groups that use particular tactics, have certain strategies, and they can identify how these groups are operating and what the most likely vulnerability that was exploited once they know and have identified what type of ransomware is in your system. Many of them maintain their own websites. The groups rather maintain websites that allow them to post what they've taken from victims and use that as leverage when they make a demand. Then finally, data aggregators and agents. Your data is for sale. Again, we talked about industries that say, this doesn't apply to me. I don't have information that is that valuable. I don't take credit cards. I don't have social security numbers. That's not what it's about. What it's about is getting that information that you have and finding uses for it. It could be personal information about people that you email with, people that you work with, and bad actors being able to use that information to spoof emails, to use that to find accounts that they're using and break into that. All of that is valuable. And just because it's not traditionally seen as valuable information doesn't mean it isn't valuable to hackers and bad actors in the new illegal economy. And now back to Cam.
Awesome. Thank you. So a couple of the things that John and I do and that our practice group does is we respond to breach for sure. We help businesses get through it. So we do see a lot of the holes that businesses have, but also we do even more risk management work with businesses to help them kind of assess their overall information flows and information management and records management and IT security and the like. And so this list, we're going to go through 15 controls for security and 5 controls for crime. So this list of 20 things, this is what we see through years of experience as being the highest value protections for businesses and oftentimes the most likely holes that businesses haven't addressed that are causing breach. So as a business leader, when you're looking at this list, this is really your to-do list for your business. This is the stuff that's imperative if, not so much if you want to avoid being a victim. We all want to avoid being victims, but to mitigate the damage. The reality is, and we'll talk about this kind of afterwards, it's going to be difficult or impossible for any business to avoid entirely being a victim. The criminals are so sophisticated and the threats are so prevalent. It's almost impossible to avoid being a victim. Really, the issue is how much can you mitigate the damage? And these steps we're going to talk about are the highest value pieces for that. So John and I are going to alternate. I'll start off with talking about one. So as we are all out of the office connecting through Wi-Fi, some of them secure, some of them not so secure, we need to have our information flows in an encrypted tunnel back to a network, either a cloud network or an on-premises network that has all kinds of security around it, including advanced firewalls and the like. And the only way to do that is to configure employees' remote devices, laptops and computers principally, to automatically use a VPN to tunnel back to our network. This is essentially transparent for employees. They don't even know it's happening. And it is probably the most important thing we can do for things like preventing hacking, ensuring the most advanced threat detection for endpoints. And this counters a lot of the various threats we see. So automated VPNs. So that's number one. I'll transition to John for number two.
Thanks, Cam. Number two, layered advanced threat protection on networks and firewalls, advanced threat protection on all remote computers. this might sound like complicated tech speak, but basically what this means is that there are threat protection programs that information security professionals use that are designed to seek out and identify behavior on your networks and on your devices that isn't consistent with what your actual users do there. So, for example, if there's a bad actor in your system that is sending out hundreds of gigabytes of data in a way that's completely inconsistent with what your users actually do, that would be flagged and appropriately quarantined by accommodating the threat protection as well as through IT. But each of these programs operates a little bit differently. They look for different patterns. They're cued in on different clues. So when we say layered, what we mean is employing multiple programs that do this. And you can work with information security attorneys. You can work with MSPs that do information security technology, that they can help you identify the right threat protection software for your network. But layering them provides better protection than just one. We recommend that you take the layering approach so that there isn't a hole in your defenses there. Firewalls, I think most people are familiar with those, but they frequently conceive of them as, okay, this is a wall of protection around my network. They actually operate certainly around networks, but you put them around individual devices as well on all remote computers. We recommend that you do that as an extra layer of protection. And the firewalls themselves can be configured to do a number of things. One of the things that we recommend is that they engage in logging. Logging is sort of what it sounds like. You're keeping a log. The firewall itself keeps a log of all of the efforts from outside actors to get in and all of the activity going out. And that will allow you, in the event that that attack does happen, to determine what has left that firewall. We've seen from a number of clients where they don't have that. There's a question after there is an attack, hey, what actually left? It can be hard to determine what that is. If you have logging functionality with your firewall, you have a better chance of being able to identify any data that gets exfiltrated during an attack.
Thanks. I want to just highlight something John said. So we know that we present to business people almost, well more than we present to technology people. And we intentionally talk about these issues so that business people can understand them, because you need to understand them. Just like you know how to read a balance sheet, or you're going to be involved in obtaining your general liability policy. Learning about cybersecurity is something that business people need to do. It's not something that we can just punt to our IT director or something like that. And so that's why we try to describe these things in ways where you can understand, because it truly is important for business people to be on top of this. So number 3 is mobile device management, which is an application that typically gets pushed out to mobile devices like phones and tablets, but also can be pushed out to computers. What it does is it gives us an ability to encrypt data, company data, on people's usually personal devices, usually personal mobile devices. It also gives us remote control over that little encrypted box and our data there. We can decredential it if an employee leaves or if a device is lost or stolen. And it gives us also lots of different ways to kind of do certain control of the device, like forcing people to have a password on a phone. So MDM is really the way to solve the fact that we all allow our employees to use their personal devices, usually to get to email, sometimes to do more than that. All right, so back to John for MFA.
MFA refers to multi-factor authentication. It's a phrase you might have heard among some of the tech people that you work with. And like Cam said, important that you understand, business leaders understand what this is. Multi-factor authentication means it requires more than one way of identifying yourself to a program, to a device, to your network. Typically, everybody knows that their passwords. That's just one form. In order to have true multi-factor, it can't just be another type of password, right? It can't just be something that you remember, your birthday, your anniversary, your kid's birthday, et cetera. It has to be something that you have or something that you are. So a key fob that has a unique code that regenerates every minute or so, whatever, that's something that you have. Something that you are, like a face scan or a fingerprint on a device. Both of those would be an acceptable second factor in multi-factor authentication. We recommend that this goes on access points, devices, network, wherever there's a means to access your network and your system. You should have this so that if passwords or credentials are compromised from a particular employee, from many employees, if there isn't that sector factor available to the bad actor, to the hacker, they can't gain access to your system. The point of multi-factor authentication. Another way of doing this that we help clients with is single sign-on or multi-factor authentication application. So a way that once you've set that up and it's an approved device, then your employees don't have to keep giving the second factor. They can just remember the password. So it operates for the employee in the same way. With this in combination with an MDM, if a laptop is stolen and a password is compromised, you can shut down the laptop. The password then isn't of use unless you have the device or the other factors that need to be authenticated, and you still gain that level of protection. And back to Cam.
Yep. So number 5, this has become critical because of the prevalence of ransomware. So sophisticated ransomware is going to get into your network, and your network is going to be encrypted. Of course, we want to avoid that from happening, but in all likelihood, it's going to happen. So in order to prevent days, weeks of loss, of lagging productivity, lagging IT infrastructure, we need to have a system that is centrally available on the flip of a switch, or at least certain portions of the network. For instance, you want your email system to have failover redundancy immediately to the internet. You want to have certain other aspects of your business operations immediately available at the flip of a switch, which usually means having a redundant system either on premises or online someplace. So your financial structure is going to be within your failover redundancy network. And then also, and that gives you the ability to not seamlessly, but close to seamlessly operate when you have a network outage. And then while you're operating to do that, your IT personnel can be restoring your system, usually in conjunction with people like John and I and a forensic investigator, because it has to be done in a way so that we just don't reinfect the new system. But a rapid backup. For companies that are good at doing this, having an immediate failover redundancy, they can be back up and running to the outside world in a matter of an hour or a couple of hours. And their system, their true network, can be restored within a matter of days. And there will be, if done right, very little business interruption loss and very little visibility of loss to the outside world.
So sandboxing of all incoming email and attachments. Sandboxing is one of my favorite terms from information security parlance because it sounds so playful. But what it is kind of just like it sounds. It creates a separate environment, a sandbox for what could be bad actor attachments or bad actor links. The way it works is you get an email from an outside source, and there's a link in it. When you click on the link, rather than going directly and connecting your system directly with that website, it sets up a side environment that's protected, and it opens up the website there. That way, if there's anything malicious about it, dangerous about it, it's not connecting directly to your system, and your information security controls can evaluate that to determine, hey, is this dangerous or not? If it's not dangerous, then your system just connects to the website normally. If it is dangerous, it can get quarantined and it won't impact your system. The benefit of this to the employees is that they are much less likely to click on something that could be dangerous, and the user experience, if done correctly, other than a split-second pause, they really don't notice anything. And so that's true both for links as well as attachments. The opposite of that, number 7, scanning of all outgoing email and attachments and an application for secure file sharing ensures that you're not sending anything malicious out. So by scanning outgoing email attachments, you're not going to send anything to other parties that could be malicious to them, thereby inviting possible liability to your organization for what you've sent them. A great way to do that is application for secure file sharing, which allows you to share documents securely without there being a danger of those being passed on or possibly grabbed in mid-transit.
Right. And the other thing that these applications do is they scan your email and attachments for certain types of information, usually things like social security numbers, credit cards, but they can be configured for other scanning. And that way, when employees inadvertently send out materials that they shouldn't be sending out by email, it stops it, tells them, hey, you have to encrypt the email, and that's when you move it to the secure file sharing. So.
Yeah.
All right, number 8. So many businesses just routinely set their users up, their employees up as administrators of their laptops. They don't even think about it. And that way, the employee can use the laptop and it's easy. But the problem with that is as an administrator, you have a privilege to download certain things, applications. And it used to be we allowed that for our employees just as a matter of convenience. The problem is, obviously, you can have a malicious employee that downloads something that he or she shouldn't. But the bigger problem really is that a lot of these downloads happen in the background without employees even knowing about it. This particularly occurs with websites that have malware embedded in them. And so if an employee isn't an administrator, it won't download. They don't have the credentials when they log into their laptop to allow a download, and it just stops all kinds of malware from getting into that access point. Some of our people need to be administrators, obviously our IT people, but many businesses, the IT administrator credentials are way too prolific. There are administrators created for employees that have long left. They're generic administrator credentials. It's just, there needs to be an audit and restructuring of IT admin privileges. And then IT people really need to log on as users when they're not doing admin stuff. That's a big area. We see big area of compromise by old, unused, compromised administrator privileges, because it gives bad actors a direct access into the network in a way that gives them all kinds of ability to do stuff as an administrator. Number 9, we see that a lot of businesses really haven't cleaned up the types of access they give to their employees. So, an employee in human resources doesn't need access to the financial accounting system. A sales employee doesn't need access to the human resources network. The reason why this is not, we don't do this just because we don't trust our employees. The reason why we restrict access privileges is because if the employee's credentials are compromised and those credentials only have limited access, then we've limited the scope of the compromise. And that's really, really critical when you're talking about malicious actors that are deploying malware, because when the malicious actor logs in as an employee with limited access permissions, whatever they download is only going to go so far as that employee had access. And that oftentimes significantly limits, if these privileges are configured the right way, it significantly limits the impact of this malicious activity. Then number 10, we have to encrypt the drives of computers. That way, if they're lost or stolen, we don't have a potential compromise of everything on the device. It's just a loss of a piece of dead hardware.
So automatic mandatory patching and updating. This is incredibly critical. What this is if you're using a Microsoft product or you're using any software that you sometimes get updates, or you know that the manufacturer is still, the programmer, the developer is still going to tinker with and improve. What this does is ensures that regularly, without there being direct human oversight, these are getting updated with the most up-to-date security patches that the manufacturer, the developer, is releasing. What this ensures is that as the developer and outside parties identify vulnerabilities in the software, that they can't be exploited, or it minimizes the chance of them being exploited, because the developer is releasing patches, updates the code that closes that vulnerability. There's been an increase in what's called zero-day vulnerabilities, meaning that as soon as the vulnerability is identified, there are hackers there to identify it, there to take advantage of it. Having automatic patching decreases your odds of suffering an attack from that. Additionally, if you're using older systems that no longer have patching support, they're no longer being updated, you want to move away from those as quickly as possible, because the identified vulnerabilities are no longer being addressed and fixed by the developer, meaning that your systems that employ those older programs are more vulnerable than your newer ones that are being patched and are being updated. Robust security information event management. This makes sure that in the event of an incident, that your information security systems are being coordinated by a centralized application, and that is not so flimsy that the security controls that you have in place aren't being properly utilized.
All right, number 13, I'll do 13 and 14. So every business has to have a cyber liability policy. You wouldn't drive a car without having an automobile policy. You can't operate a business without having an information insurance policy. You need to make sure that it's the right policy. They're not all the same. Many of them have carve-outs that are bad. Many of them don't cover all the types of information you need covered. There's lots of policy limits. There's lots of policy sublimits. If we can do anything for business, John and I and our group does anything, it's to get you into the right cyber liability policy very, very quickly, because some of the other stuff takes longer to fix. But this is something that can be accomplished usually fairly expeditiously. The other thing is every business needs to have a cybercrime policy. We all move money around in one way, shape, or form or another. And your crime policy, your regular crime policy, is not going to cover cybercrime. It's going to have exclusions. You need to have an actual cybercrime policy to cover loss of money. Typical cyber liability policies are not going to cover loss of money. They're going to cover loss of information and the consequences of that. You have to have a cybercrime policy if you want coverage for loss of money. Number 14, our vendors are one of our biggest risks, because we give information to a lot of third parties. One of the things that John and I find is most surprising to businesses when we do risk assessments is for them to find out just how many people they give their information to. And we businesses are responsible for making sure that whoever we give our information to takes appropriate care of it, meets regulatory requirements, meets industry standards, that type of stuff. And that requires us to do some due diligence. Not all businesses require the same, not all vendors require the same amount of due diligence, but some amount of due diligence, and entering into appropriate agreements with our vendors. This is something that can take really years for a business to get through, but it's important because we give our information to tons of third parties.
Number 15, configure video conferencing for security and privacy. Imperative in this age of remote working is making sure that the primary means that we continue to maintain close contacts with colleagues and clients, that is secure. Now, when we're talking about security and policy configurations for video conferencing, we mean that it's the conference itself is password protected. Frequently, that's embedded in the link. What you don't want is a casual surfer of Zoom meeting URLs or Microsoft Team links to accidentally come into your video conference without having some sort of password preventing them from doing so. With regard to privacy, for those of you who joined this video conference at the beginning and heard, probably saw the prompt and heard that this would be recorded, that's a setting within Zoom that you can set. And by doing that, by clicking that setting and making sure that privacy consents and notice are properly presented to attendees, you're giving notice when a meeting is recorded, you're obtaining their consent to record any participation they have in that meeting. As I mentioned at the top, as privacy laws become more prevalent in the United States, and certainly it's coming to New England as well, you're going to see a greater emphasis on this type of consent and disclosure system. So make sure you take advantage of that with any video conferencing software that you're using.
John, we have about 10 minutes before we should transition to question and answer. So why don't I get through this, rip through this next slide, and then you can do the following one. All right, so we would be really remiss if we didn't spend some time talking about what you need to do to prevent loss of money. So far, we've been talking a lot about loss of information. Sometimes loss of information can lead to loss of money. Certainly, a compromise of email credentials that allows a thief to step into email streams and take over our email systems, that's going to be a loss of information that leads to a loss of money. But there are specific steps that we need to put in place to stop transfers of money that shouldn't occur. So these are the 5 pieces. First of all, we need to find out who of our employees has access to these accounts and what their permissions and privileges are. Oftentimes, too many employees have access to financial accounts or applications that they don't need access to, or their access is broader than it really needs to be. So we first need to figure out who has access and what can they do, and what do they really need to do so that we can limit that access. Number 2, we have to put controls on certain types of activities and transactions and require one of 2 things, either 2 people to authorize it, 2 independent people to authorize it, or at the least 1 person to authorize it and a second person who gets notice. So for instance, for certain large transactions in financial accounts, we're going to want 2 independent people logging on using multi-factor authentication and their own passwords. We want 2 people authorizing that transaction. For other types of activities, like we may just want dual notifications. So when a new payee is set up, in a new ACH payee is set up, or a new employee is set up in a payroll system, we're going to want a second person to get notification of that so that they can ensure that that's a proper transaction. That's not either a rogue employee trying to steal money or a bad actor who's got access somehow trying to steal money. Number 3, we need to make sure that all of our financial accounts and applications have multi-factor authentication. If you have a bank that doesn't have MFA as an option, you got to find a new bank. This is absolutely standard for bank applications. Also, remember, we run a lot of financial applications on our systems for accounting and financial controls, and those types of applications should have multi-factor authentication as well. So that's 3 and 4, and then 5. So this is 5 is probably something that very few people have heard about. But when we sign agreements with customers or vendors, we can have provisions in them that talk about who is responsible in the event of a cyber financial crime. For example, if we are the vendor and if our client is the vendor and we're looking to put together a contract with a customer, one of the things that we'll say in the contract is, hey, we're going to tell you how to pay us using this form, and this person or these people have the ability to tell you how to pay us. We won't alter how we tell you to pay us without this form. And if we do that, if we say we're going to, that we want to change the way you pay us, you need to call us and ensure that we're actually telling you to change the way that you pay us, and that you confirm the new account information. And that kind of way of allocating liability is very, very effective. We also put other things in the agreements, including requirements of crime insurance and stuff like that. But that's a really effective way, if all else fails and the money is gone, to avoid the problems that come from it, which is usually, the customer won't pay you or the vendor won't supply you with goods. All right, John, you want to rip through this slide a bit?
I'll go through this real fast. So impacts on IT personnel and finances. We've mentioned a couple times that the strain of responding to the ever-evolving technological advances of bad actors puts a strain on IT personnel and finance. This slide summarizes it. Demoralization and burnout of IT professionals. We've seen people quit because the strain has become too much. Business income loss from weeks and months of shutdown and lagging IT infrastructure and employees' productivity. It's a real issue. I mean, the slide that indicated at the average downtime following a ransomware is 21 days. What would you do if you lost 21 days of income for your business? Intense customer scrutiny and likely loss of customers and revenue during and after a security incident. This is spot on, and one of the greatest sources of stress for clients that we help following a breach is how are they going to negotiate with clients? How are they going to tell them what happened? One of the greatest values that we provide, actually, as Information Security Counsel following a breach, is being able to negotiate with customers and explain in a way that is reasonable and understandable to them what happened, how this impacts them practically, and why they should continue to trust this particular company with their information. Huge expenses due to lack of proper cyber insurance. Cam's already addressed this. Cyber insurance, incredibly important. One of the first things that we look at when we're doing a risk assessment for a company, they can save millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars when the cyber insurance is properly deployed for a company. And then finally, time and some cost to restructure budget and IT infrastructure to implement proper cybersecurity controls. It's not, this is not automatic. It's not like the same blueprint works for every organization. You have to put some thought into it. It's worthwhile. You will get a cybersecurity program, an information security program that reflects your needs and your budget, but you do have to put the time into thinking about it and rolling it out appropriately.
Awesome. We have a couple of questions too that I'll address after I kind of cover this last piece. All right, so what is going to happen as we go forward in this industry? Well, as businesses, you just have to understand you're going to be hit with an attack. It's not a matter of if, it's more a matter of when, how bad it will be, how many times you're going to get hit, because a couple of things are true. Number one is attacks are happening so constantly that today is going to have one. You're going to have a successful attack. You might have another successful attack 2 weeks from now or 2 months from now. Also, criminals share information. So companies that are vulnerable to attacks become known, and the criminals share information about that. So if you're prone, you're definitely going to see multiple attacks. the criminal enterprise is only growing more sophisticated. This is a business with tiers and, you know, parts that are committed to development, parts that are committed to information gathering, parts that are committed to selling identities. This is a business, and it's not going to get less sophisticated. If you're waiting for a solution to come from the government, don't hold your breath. It's not happening. You know, I'm aware of the recent attempts to limit ransomware payments by regulating the cryptocurrency market. Boy, that would be great, but it's not happening soon. I mean, these are global institutions, cryptocurrency exchanges. They're not subject to regulation very easily, and even if they were, countries are not really in agreement on what to do about it. And then the last thing is, this is the last piece of good news. Good cybersecurity doesn't necessarily have to cost more. You just have to be smarter about how you spend your existing IT dollar. So that said, let me kind of transition to the two questions, and then we'll open it up for other questions. So the first is, with various companies, with various people in the company working with vendors, how do you vet vendors? So there's two really pieces of this. One is, how do you know that your employees are contracting with vendors, and then what do you do to vet them? So how do you know is a harder problem to solve, because there are cultural aspects in it. We have to, as businesses, put in place certain people controls to make sure that people don't think that they can just give information to a vendor, to the vendor of their choosing. Now, part of that is cultural, part of it is financial, because a lot of times those vendors require contracts, and so you can catch it at the financial stage before you're going to pay a vendor for a service. A lot of times you can get caught at the IT stage, because a business operating unit will need IT support to integrate some sort of technology or cloud, and so you can catch it at that stage. But no matter how you catch it, one of the things that needs to be integrated into every business when we're deciding who we give our information to are factors like, you know, is this the right product? How's this going to work with our IT infrastructure? How much is it going to cost? And what are the security considerations? That needs to become a business decision-making factor. And then the second part, how do you do due diligence? You know, you ask them for their information security policies. You might ask them for their insurance policy, depending on who they are. You might ask them for background information on their risk assessments and who did it and what the outcome was. There's certain industry certifications that some companies participate in. So for instance, a SOC 2 Type 2 is a specific type of information security certification. And so if you get a company's SOC 2 report, you're going to know a lot about their security. So that's the way you do due diligence. All right.
And sorry, Cam, one thing I would say on that quickly is, yep, if you're asking questions and either they're reluctant to give reliable information or decent information, or you don't like their answers and that makes you uncomfortable using them, that's the point of the due diligence. It's not just a check the box.
And the next question is about cryptocurrency. What's the strategy for dealing with it? Does it ever make sense to pay ransom? So first of all, we believe that every business has options available to it that will eliminate the need to pay ransom. Things like, you know, failover redundancy, effective backups, access controls, minimizing the scope of the breach. That's stuff that will essentially eliminate the need to pay ransom, because you can get back up. Now, it's not always easy. You still have to ensure that when you restore from backup, you're not reinfecting your system. It takes time, or maybe downtime, depending on what your backup systems are. But everybody can avoid paying ransom. If you can't avoid paying ransom, and there are reasons for it, like you can't bear to be down for 2 days. Some of these, you know, infrastructure companies can't bear to be down for 2 days. Or you've lost data. So during a ransomware attack, the bad actors have exported data, and you really want to protect that data from being sold on the dark web. You might consider paying ransom. And there's two factors in this. Number one, you have to get professionals who know how to vet the criminals. Some criminals are trustworthy, some are not. And you're not going to know that. You know, we know some of that. We work with law enforcement individuals that know a lot about that. We work with, you know, super techie forensic people that know a lot about that. But we make determinations: can we trust these folks or not? And the criminals will negotiate with us and give us samples of what they have. And you know, there is some honor among some thieves. And so you got to vet that. The other thing, and then if these are not people who you can trust, you know, you're probably not going to pay the ransom unless you have no other choice. The other thing you got to be careful of is there are some advisories out from the federal financial regulators about not paying ransom to actors on prohibited lists, and there being really no forgiveness for that. So we just have to be careful whenever we do pay ransom that we make sure that we're not paying it to terrorists. So. All right, we're a little over, but any other questions? Put them in the chat, and we'll see if we can't hit them quickly.
Cam and John, while we're waiting for any more questions, I want to thank you so much. So the moral of the story, unless you want to be deciphering the dishonorable criminals from the maybe slightly honorable ones, you need to get all of these pieces in place. Is that what I'm gathering?
This is definitely a to-do list. Take this and, you know, go back and ask yourself and your professional service providers, how do we start accomplishing these tasks?
And looking at the appendices in the back, it says assemble your team, and that's really important as you go into this and be prepared for a breach.